Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. My name is Julia Micallef. I just completed my undergraduate degree in life science at Ontario Tech University, and I will be starting my master's in health science at Ontario Tech University in September. Today, I'm going to be discussing my technical report, which describes the development of an intramuscular injection simulation for nursing students. So intramuscular injections are the preferred route of administration of medicines such as epinephrine and vaccines, as we know. But despite how commonly it's done, the average success rate is only 35 to 52%. But it's been shown to be improved to 75% when practiced on an injection simulator first. Unfortunately, the current IM simulators used by nursing students are not realistic and quite expensive. So it was our aim to develop an inexpensive yet realistic IM injection simulator and provide insights onto its assessment of perceived realism and its potential use as an educational tool for nursing students. So the materials used to create the injection pads was primarily silicone, but we added different ratios of silicone softener to the dermis, fat, and muscle layer to distinguish between those three layers. We also used silicone coloring to emphasize those three layers as well. We added a sponge in the injection pad to absorb the injecting liquid, and we used jumbo cupcake trays as the silicone mold. To construct the simulator, the process began with the dermis layer, where we combined one part of silicone and skin tone coloring to pour into the cupcake trays. And from there, we set it to cure on a 75 to 85 degrees Celsius heating bed for 10 minutes. Without this heat source, this processing step takes about 1 hour. Once cured, we moved on to the fat layer, and that was created using 1 part silicone to 2 parts slacker, or a silicone softener. And that will make the fat layer a lot softer than the dermis layer. We also added yellow coloring, and this was set to cure for 1 hour on the heating bed. The fat layer will take about 5 hours to cure without a heating source. We then added the cellulose sponge, which fit the dimensions to fit perfectly within the injection pad. And again, this was used to absorb the injecting liquid. We then created the muscle layer, which was created using 1 part slacker, 1 part silicone. So this makes this layer slightly softer than the dermis layer, but not as soft as the fat layer. It was colored red and porridge to cover the sponge completely. And this was set aside to cure for 45 minutes on the heating bed. And without that heat source, this curing step takes approximately 2 hours. To get feedback and assess the realism, we worked in collaboration with the nursing team at Lakeridge Health Hospital in Oshawa, Ontario. And during one of their monthly orientation sessions, there were 20 volunteer nurses, and we provided them with 20 injection pads, as well as IM injection needles, alcohol wipes, and water as the injecting liquid. The nurses were instructed to perform the injection at least 3 times using the simulator. And then they were given the link to a survey through Google Forms. And this was to provide us with feedback that assessed the realism of the IM injection pads, how it compared to previous models that they've used, possible improvements, and how well this would work as an educational tool. The survey was created based on a prior publication where this research team created a simulator to perform a different skill. So our survey consisted of 18 questions, and we had a 55% response rate. Shown here, figure 1 is the outcome of the simulator. So we worked in collaboration with the Faculty of Nursing at Ontario Tech University to produce 140 of these IM simulators. All the costs ended up resulting to be $10.27 Canadian per injection pad, and that included labor costs. So in figure 1, hopefully you can see there's the dermis layer, the fat layer, and the muscle layer. Also in the cross section, you can see the sponge that resides within the muscle layer. We also decided to add a drainage hole within the muscle layer so that the liquid that the sponge absorbs can be pushed out when needed. The outcome of the assessment and feedback can be shown in figure 2 and 3. Starting with figure 2, this shows the results of the question in the survey from the volunteer nurses, which asked them to compare the realism of this IM injection pad with previous simulators that they have used. So as you can see, that all of the nurses that filled out the survey agreed that this new IM injection simulator was more realistic than previous ones they've used in the past. Figure 3 here shows the results from a survey question given to the volunteer nurses, which asked how well they think that this IM injection pad would be used as an educational tool for nursing students. And you can see 54.5% of the nurses strongly agreed that this would be a good educational tool to use for nursing students, and 45.5% just agreed that it would be a good educational tool for nursing students. So these results show high perceived realism and that the model is rated suitable for educational purposes. Some areas for improvement that they suggested specifically was for the dermis layer to not be as thick or as tough as it was. Also to make the fat layer not as thick, as sometimes the needle wouldn't reach the sponge, so the injecting liquid would protrude from the injection site instead of staying within the sponge, as well as changing the shape of the injection pad to be more realistic. So after that, we gave the injection pads to the nursing students at Ontario Tech University, and they also tested out the injection pads. They were given a similar survey, but slightly different, to have questions more catered to the students' experience and how well these injection pads helped them learn and the realism. And we also were in contact with a team in Singapore in a hospital there, and their nurses also tested out the injection pads and gave us feedback through a survey that was identical to the one that we gave to the volunteer nurses at Lake Ridge Health. So our next steps now, what we've been starting to work on, is making those improvements that were suggested by all of our volunteers. So that's what's shown in figure 4 here. This is just the preliminary improved IM injection simulator. This new design includes 3D printed shoulder base, which is around here. Also with an insert for the newly shaped IM injection pad. So you can see we've been trying to start playing with different skin tones for the silicone, but we're working more towards getting a match for a 3D filament so that the overall look is more uniform. So in conclusion, these soft silicone IM injection simulators are cost effective and more realistic to the alternative commercially available trainers. And using the feedback that we've been given, we can improve these models to achieve an even higher realism and create an even better experience for the students to learn this technique. And that's what the hopes in the future, that when these students graduate and enter the clinical setting, they are more prepared and more confident in performing the skill on an actual patient. So that's all for me. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day.